Now, I love finding hidden gem thrillers on streaming services, and I do that a lot here on the channel. But Prime Video specifically, I feel like people are really sleeping on it right now. Like, everyone's always talking about Netflix, everyone's debating HBO Max, and Prime is just sitting there with some genuinely great stuff that their own algorithm is basically burying. And I just don't think I've ever pulled together a list from Prime where I felt this strongly about every single pick on it. So this video is going to be 10 of the most disturbing, most gripping thrillers that Prime Video is basically hiding from you right now. Oh, and quick thing, all the streaming availability for every movie on this list is in the first pinned comment below. Go check that out. Let's get into it. So first up, we've got what I think is one of the most underrated genre mashups ever put on screen. And it's one that I almost never see people bring up anymore, which is a shame because it is really, really good.
Civilized towns. You look a man direct in the face when you talk to him.
It starts out as a straight Western, like genuinely feels like a classic Western. You've got a sheriff, a rescue mission, a desolate landscape, men a few words doing what they have to do. And if you like Westerns, that first half alone is worth your time because the characters are really well drawn. These aren't just archetypes, you actually end up caring about these people. And the dialogue is surprisingly witty. Like, there are moments early on where you're genuinely laughing, and I think that's intentional because of what the movie does to you later. Because the back half of this film goes somewhere that I genuinely did not expect, and I really can't say much without giving it away. What I will say is that it goes full horror, and not in a subtle way. The final act of this movie is one of the most brutal, graphic things I've seen in a genre film. And I say that not to put people off, but because I want you to know going in that this is not a typical Western. It earns every bit of that darkness though, because by the time it gets there, you're so invested in these characters that it hits completely differently than it would if the film had just started there. Kurt Russell leads this, and he is just solid as ever. The whole cast really. Patrick Wilson, Richard Jenkins, Matthew Fox, everybody's doing great work. And the director, as Craig Zoller, I mean, this is a confident debut. He knows exactly what kind of movie he's making, and he doesn't apologize for it at any point. If you like Westerns at all, or even if you just like really committed genre filmmaking that's willing to go to genuinely dark places, this one is worth your time. That movie is Bone Tomahawk. Now this next one is one that I think got really hurt by its release timing, and it's a shame because there's more going on here than most people gave it credit for.
Cherie.
Ethan?
That's me.
It opens almost like a romantic comedy. Like, genuinely, you've got a woman going on a reluctant first date, there's good chemistry, flirty conversation, a nice dinner, it's almost charming. And then the movie makes a pretty hard turn and becomes something else entirely. It shifts into the survival thriller where the lead character is completely trapped, trying to stay calm on the outside while everything is unraveling. And that contrast is actually really effective when it works. The lead performance here is the main reason to watch it. She's carrying this movie through some pretty significant tonal shifts, and she never really loses you. There's also this one directorial choice, kind of a self-aware camera moment that I genuinely thought was clever and elevated the film a little above the average thriller of this type.
What are you?
Now, I'll be honest, the movie doesn't always land. When it goes surreal, it goes pretty hard in that direction, and not every choice connects. And I think it's trying to be a few different things at once, which can make it feel a little uneven. But the core idea, the way the lead character even ends up in the situation, the manipulation that's baked into the setup, that's actually saying something real, and I appreciated that. It premiered at Sundance back in 2020, and then kind of got swallowed up by the pandemic, which I think really hurt it. It deserved more of a conversation than it got. That movie is Run, Sweetheart, Run.
You're early.
Alright, number 8 is a remake, and I know that word alone is enough to make most of you check out, but hear me out on this one. The premise is genuinely unsettling. You've got twin boys being sent to stay with their mother, except she's just had facial surgery and her whole face is wrapped in bandages. And the older boy starts to notice things that don't quite match up with his memories of her, behavioral things, small things at first. And the question of whether this is actually his mother becomes this really creeping, slow burn source of dread that the story builds on throughout. Now, the original Austrian film from 2014 is exceptional. If you haven't seen it, I'd actually recommend starting there because it is a masterclass in atmosphere and sustained unease. This American version, directed by Matt Sobel and starring Naomi Watts, it's a decent watch. The cinematography is clean and well done. The Crovetti twins are actually really good, especially in the second half, where the movie is at its most engaging.
You're not her mother.
But the atmosphere just isn't quite there the way it is in the original. That feeling of being watched, of something being fundamentally wrong in a way you can't name, this version doesn't hold on to that as well. In Naomi Watts, I think she leans a bit too far into the obvious creepiness of the role without developing the kind of complexity that would make it truly unsettling. That's a script problem as much as anything else. But that said, if you've never seen the original and you want the story in English with solid performances, it's worth a watch. It's streaming on Prime right now, and it has enough going for it to land on this list. That movie is Goodnight, Mommy.
You're going to be great.
Now this next one, and I want to be upfront about this, is absolutely not for everyone. But for a very specific kind of viewer, it is one of the most visually striking and deeply uncomfortable films of the last decade. And I think it's criminally overlooked. It's set in the fashion industry, and if you go in expecting a straightforward thriller about modeling, you are going to be surprised. What this film actually is more of a slow, psychological descent dressed up in gorgeous, almost hypnotic visuals. And the director, Nicolas Winding Refn, if you've seen Drive or Only God Forgives, you already know he makes movies that are more about sensation and atmosphere than traditional narrative. That is very much the case here. Elle Fanning plays a young model entering this world, and what happens to her, or what she becomes, I suppose, is really the core of the film. The runway sequences are genuinely unlike anything I've seen, like striking lighting, geometric staging, almost Kubrick influenced in the way it's composed. You can feel the David Lynch influence in this movie too, pretty heavily. It's that kind of film. Is it self-indulgent sometimes? Yeah, honestly it is. There are moments where you can tell Refn is pressing buttons just to see the reaction. But I've never found it boring, not even in its most excessive moments. It gets under your skin and it tends to stay there. And I think the themes around ambition and beauty and what the world extracts from women, especially young women, are actually worth sitting with. If you like The Black Swan, if you're into slow burn psychological stuff with strong visuals, this is a very worthwhile watch. That movie is The Neon Demon. So number 6 is one that I think works really well as a pure thriller. And it's a recent one, so some of you have probably already seen it, but I still think it's flying under the radar more than it should be. The setup is simple and really effective. A woman goes on a first date at a nice restaurant in Chicago, and while she's sitting there waiting, she starts receiving anonymous messages through an app on her phone. Messages from someone in that same restaurant, and those messages start telling her that the people she loves are in immediate danger, and she has to keep acting normal, keep sitting there, don't tell anyone, don't make a scene. That premise is genuinely stressful. The restaurant becomes a trap, every other diner is a suspect, and watching the lead character, played by Megan Fahey, try to hold herself together while her brain is absolutely on fire, that tension is sustained really well throughout. Christopher Landon directed this, and he's good at keeping things moving. The pacing is tight, the editing is sharp, and Fahey is really doing a lot with his role. Now I will say the villain reveal is a little underwhelming, and if you start poking at some of the plot mechanics afterward, a few things don't hold up as well as you'd like. But here's the thing, while you're watching it, you're not going to be thinking about any of that. You're going to be too locked in. And for a thriller, honestly, that's really what matters. There's also something in the script about the specific kind of isolation the lead character faces that I thought was handled smartly. It's not just physical isolation, there's a systemic layer to it that gave the film a little more weight than your average single location thriller. That movie is Drop. And look, real quick before we get into the top 5, if you're finding this list useful and you want more recommendations like this, hit subscribe and like the video. I put a lot of time into digging these up, and I want to make sure you never run out of great stuff to watch. Okay, top 5. Let's go. All right, number 5, and this is where the list gets really serious, because from here on out, these are films I feel very strongly about. This one is told in fragments, non-linear, deliberately disorienting, and that's not a flaw, it's the entire point. Because the film is essentially putting you inside the mental state of a mother who is trying to process something catastrophic that her child caused, and the fractured storytelling mirrors what that internal experience actually feels like. Now, I want to be really careful here because the less you know going in, the better this movie hits. What I will tell you is that it centers on the relationship between a mother and her son, and it is one of the most psychologically uncomfortable portrayals of that relationship that I've ever seen on film. It goes to places that most movies wouldn't dare to go, and it does it without sensationalizing anything. Tilda Swinton leads this movie, and she is extraordinary in it. Like, genuinely one of the best performances I can think of in this genre. She is carrying an enormous amount of weight in every single scene. Grief and guilt and love that's twisted up with resentment. And she does it without ever going over the top.
News to me.
Bit shocked, Kevin.
The child is portrayed across 3 different actors at different ages, and each of them is deeply unsettling in a way that's hard to describe. Not horror movie creepy, something more real than that, and therefore much scarier. Director Lynn Ramsey, and if you've seen You Were Never Really Here, you know what she's capable of, is working at an incredibly high level here. This is one of those films that I think about for a long time after watching it. That film is We Need to Talk About Kevin. Okay, so number 4. And I mean this, if you haven't seen this movie yet, please just go in as blind as you possibly can, because the experience of watching it unfold without knowing where it's going is really, really special.
Oh, that's just giving me goosebumps. Look, Pamela. Oh, no.
What I can tell you is that it's set primarily at this sprawling, opulent English estate over a summer, and it follows a young scholarship student at Oxford who gets pulled into the orbit of a very wealthy, very charming aristocratic family. And the film is essentially about desire and ambition, and the ugly transactional nature that lives underneath seemingly effortless privilege. It's also kind of wickedly funny at times, which catches you off guard. Barry Keoghan leads this, and look, if you followed his career at all, you know he specializes in playing characters where you're never quite sure what's going on underneath the surface. He takes that to a whole different level here. His performance is the kind of thing that splits audiences. Some people are unsettled, some people are completely fascinated, some people are both at once, and I think that reaction is very much by design.
I just thought that maybe I could help.
You're not leaving us. You're not leaving Saltburn.
The supporting cast is genuinely great. Rosamund Pike in particular is an absolute force of nature in this movie. And the writing by Emerald Fennell, she also directed this, her second film after Promising Young Woman, is sharp and mean and occasionally very funny in the way that things are funny when they're also kind of horrifying. I'll just say that final scene is going to stay with you. It's the kind of ending that people talk about for a while, and rightfully so. That movie is Saltburn. Now, number 3, and this is genuinely one of my favorite thrillers of the last few years, and I don't think enough people are talking about it. 2 young missionaries from the LDS church knock on a man's door. He invites them in, and what happens once they're inside is essentially a very tightly constructed, incredibly well-performed intellectual and psychological showdown that gets progressively more terrifying as it goes on. The confined setting, you're basically in one location for most of this movie, is used really, really effectively. Hugh Grant plays the man, and I have to say, this is honestly the best thing I've seen him do. Like, forget everything you associate with Hugh Grant. He is genuinely chilling in this role, but in a way that's almost seductive. He's charming and well-spoken and clearly very smart, and that makes him so much more frightening than if he were just outwardly menacing. He's the kind of villain who smiles at you while pulling the floor out from under you. What I love about this film is that it's not cheap with its material. It's not anti-religion in an obvious sledgehammer way. It's asking much harder questions about why we believe the things we believe, where those beliefs actually come from, and what happens when someone decides to systematically test all of it. That's where the real horror lives in this movie. Not in violence, but in ideas. It's a beautifully made film. Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East are excellent opposite Grant. The 3-person dynamic is what holds the whole thing together. That movie is Heretic.
I'm gonna ask you some questions. How many are there?
One guy inside the front door, second guy on the top floor.
All right, number 2. And this one is directed by Lynn Ramsey. Yeah, same director as We Need to Talk About Kevin. And I think it might actually be her best film, which is saying a lot. On the surface, the premise is pretty simple. A guy with a traumatic past takes on dangerous jobs. That's basically it. But what Ramsey does with that premise is something really special. She strips out almost all conventional narrative and tells this story purely through sensation and atmosphere and implication. She drops you into the middle of moments. She cuts away before the expected beat. She sometimes removes the main character from the screen entirely and just leaves you with the aftermath, sounds and spacers and reactions. And somehow, that is more effective than showing you everything directly. Joaquin Phoenix plays the lead, and he barely speaks in this movie. He doesn't need to. He communicates an entire life of damage through the way he holds himself, the way he moves through spaces. It is a deeply physical, deeply internal performance that I honestly think doesn't get the credit it deserves, even though he's had so many great performances.
Can you hear me? My name's Joe. It's okay, come here. Close your eyes.
This one feels different, more raw maybe. The film has the DNA of gritty 1970s crime cinema running through it. You can feel the Taxi Driver influence, the way it looks at a broken man trying to navigate a world that broke him. But Ramsey does something with it that's completely her own. It's also genuinely sad in a way that the thriller genre very rarely allows itself to be. That combination is what makes it special. If you like thrillers that trust your intelligence and don't hold your hand, this is a strong recommendation. That movie is You Were Never Really Here. And my number one pick on this list, and I'll say up front, this one is for a specific kind of viewer. And if you go in expecting a conventional horror film, you may come out confused.
I can feel her. Oh, she can see me.
So I want to set expectations correctly. This is a 2018 film, a reimagining of a 1977 horror classic, and it is set at a prestigious German dance academy in 1970s Berlin that is hiding something very dark underneath its surface. And the way it builds that dread is through atmosphere and sound and texture rather than conventional scares. It is a slow burn. It is deliberately paced, and if you let it breathe, it is one of the most unsettling films I've seen in years. The director is Luca Guadagnino, and yeah, the same guy who made Call Me By Your Name and Challengers. And this feels like a completely different filmmaker somehow, which I think is a testament to how committed he was to getting the tone right. The score by Tom York is genuinely haunting, like one of the best original scores in recent memory. The production design, the architecture, the way every space feels slightly wrong, it all accumulates into this overwhelming sense that something is deeply, fundamentally off. Tilda Swinton is in this movie in multiple roles, one of them in physical disguise, and it's one of those casting choices that sounds like a gimmick, but actually serves the themes of the film really well. Dakota Johnson is quietly very good as a lead. Mia Goth is in it too, doing exactly what the role asks of her. I'll be honest, the political subplot involving 1977 Berlin doesn't always integrate smoothly, and there are moments where the film is juggling a few too many ideas at once. But the core of it, what it's saying about feminine power and darkness and the cost of transformation, is extraordinary. And it goes somewhere in the final act that very few horror films are willing to go. My number one pick on this list is Suspiria. And that's the list. Look, before you go, if you want to keep going with hidden gems, I've got a video coming up right now about Netflix. Because Netflix has quietly added some genuinely great movies recently, and they're buried just like these were. We're talking dark psychological storytelling, a gritty crime thriller set over one intense night in New York, a bold directorial debut that mixes mystery with real sharp commentary, and a psychological horror classic that doesn't need a single monster to be completely terrifying. If that sounds like your kind of thing, tap that video right now, and I'll see you there.